The judge leaned back in his chair, smirking, as if the case was already over. A teenager in a wrinkled hoodie stood at the defendant's table, quiet, unflinching, with eyes that seemed too sharp for his age. The courtroom thought they knew how this story would end, but what no one realized was that the boy wasn't just another scared kid on trial. He was about to flip the entire system upside down. The buzz of fluorescent lights hummed above, mixing with the scratch of hens against paper. Reporters filled the benches in the back, whispering like they were watching a show they already knew the ending to. 17-year-old Malik Turner stood motionless, his hands resting on the table in front of him. To the court, he looked like any other teenager accused of something reckless. The charge: grand theft auto, a stolen car, a police chase, a quick arrest. On the surface, it looked airtight, but Malik knew something the court didn't. The story the prosecutor was selling wasn't the truth. Judge Preston, a man with thinning silver hair and the kind of face that had seen too many guilty pleas, squinted down at the boy. He had the look of someone convinced this was just another case to clear off the docket. "Prosecutor Mills," the judge said. "Proceed." Mills, a tall, polished man in a navy suit, stepped confidently toward the jury box, his shoes clicking with authority. His voice dripped with certainty. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "the defense may try to convince you that young Mr. Turner is some unfortunate victim of circumstance. But let's be honest, what kind of victim runs from the police? What kind of innocent kid is caught inside a stolen vehicle speeding down Jefferson Avenue at 2 in the morning?" His words landed like heavy stones in the silence. Some jurors shifted in their seats, already leaning in his direction. Malik didn't move. He didn't flinch. He simply watched. The prosecutor lifted a sheet of paper dramatically. "Here, I have the sworn testimony of Officer Bradley. He personally witnessed the defendant behind the wheel of the stolen Lexus. He pursued, he arrested, and the evidence is all here." Judge Preston adjusted his glasses, nodding. "Seems straightforward to me," the gallery murmured in agreement. Most of them thought the same thing. Open and shut case. But Malik wasn't like most kids his age. For 3 years, he had devoured law books in the public library. He had memorized cases, studied trial transcripts, even watched live hearings online. Where others saw finality, Malik saw cracks, and he knew exactly where to press. The judge turned to the defense table. "Miss Harris, your client's response?" Malik's public defender, nervous, underprepared, and clearly overwhelmed, rose hesitantly. "Your Honor, my client—" But Malik reached out, placing a steady hand on her arm. She froze, startled. He whispered just loud enough for her to hear, "I'll take it from here." The entire courtroom went still. Then Malik straightened, pulling back his shoulders with a calmness that didn't belong to someone his age. "Your Honor," he said clearly, his voice steady, "I'll be representing myself." A ripple of disbelief spread through the courtroom. The bailiff blinked in surprise. Reporters' pens froze in midair. The judge narrowed his eyes, amusement flickering at the edges of his mouth. "You'll what?" Malik's expression didn't change. "I'll be defending myself." Gasps and muffled laughter rolled through the gallery. Prosecutor Mills allowed himself a smirk. "Well," he muttered, "this should be interesting." But no one was laughing when Malik took his first deliberate step forward. The air felt heavy, every eye fixed on him. Malik let the silence stretch just long enough to make the room shift uncomfortably. Then he turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Mills," Malik said, "you claim Officer Bradley personally saw me behind the wheel?" Mills crossed his arms. "That's correct. It's in his report." Malik nodded slowly. "And you're presenting that testimony as fact?" "Yes," Mills replied, sounding impatient. "The officer swore to it." Malik turned, addressing the judge now. "Then I move to strike that testimony from the record." The judge raised an eyebrow. "On what grounds?" "For one simple reason," Malik said, pulling his hands from his pockets and gesturing calmly. "Because Officer Bradley wasn't even there when the chase began." The gallery erupted with murmurs. Even the stenographer paused her typing for a split second. Mills frowned, his smirk faltering. "What are you talking about?" "I'd like to request access to the officer's GPS logs from his patrol car that night," Malik continued, his voice clear. "If he really witnessed me behind the wheel, then his location data should confirm it. But something tells me he let the words hang sharp as a knife. It won't." The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Preston shifted in his chair, clearly unsettled. He looked to Mills. "Does the prosecution have an issue with verifying the GPS logs?" Mills hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. The jury noticed, the reporters noticed, the judge noticed. Finally, Mills cleared his throat. "No objection, Your Honor." And just like that, the courtroom shifted. The once confident prosecutor suddenly looked less certain. Malik didn't stop there. "Since we're talking about evidence," he said, his tone steady, "let's discuss fingerprints." Mills latched onto the lifeline. "Yes, the defendant's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel of the stolen Lexus. That is irrefutable." Malik gave a small nod. "That's true, but let's think logically." He turned to face the jury, locking eyes with each of them one by one. "If you Walk into a store and try on a jacket. Maybe zip it up, maybe put your hands in the pockets, then put it back on the rack. Later that day, someone else steals it. Would your fingerprints prove you were the thief? The jury shifted. Someone in the gallery muttered under their breath. The question hit harder than anyone expected. The Lexus in question, Malik continued, was parked outside a gas station hours before the chase. I was there with friends. I touched the car. I even opened the door because it was already unlocked. Stupid? Yes. Criminal? No. Then, in a voice like a razor blade, does touching something make you guilty of stealing it? Mills stiffened. The forensic evidence speaks for itself. Does it? Malik asked, tilting his head. Because, Your Honor, I have one question. Was the forensic specialist who processed those fingerprints subpoenaed to testify here today? The judge glanced at Mills. The prosecutor froze. Then reluctantly, no. A collective gasp rippled across the courtroom. Malik spread his hands slightly, his voice calm but cutting. So the state wants to convict me with forensic evidence, but doesn't think it's necessary to bring in the actual expert who handled that evidence? No cross-examination, no chain of custody, just trust them. The silence. No chain of custody, just trust them. The silence afterward was like a held breath. Judge Preston rubbed his temple. The case, once thought to be routine, was already unraveling, and Malik was only getting started. The tension reached a breaking point when Malik reached into his file folder. Your Honor, he said, I'd like to enter into evidence a statement from the registered owner of the vehicle, Mr. Jonathan Reed. The judge frowned. The owner? Yes. Malik unfolded a transcript and held it up. Mr. Reed told officers that he left his car running when he went into the gas station, and when he came out, his words, not mine, some kid jumped in and drove off. But it wasn't the guy they arrested. The kid I saw was white. The words slammed into the room like a thunderclap. The gallery gasped. Jurors' eyes widened. Even the judge's composure cracked. Malik let the silence linger before lowering the paper. His gaze locked on the prosecutor. Funny, isn't it, that this statement was conveniently missing from your filings? Prosecutor Mills's jaw tightened. Irrelevant, he barked, trying to regain control. The defendant was still caught near the scene. Malik's voice dropped, calm but unyielding. Near the scene, not in the car, not fleeing, just walking home after buying snacks with my friends. The only thing tying me to this crime is bad police work and worse assumptions. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. And then Malik leaned in, his voice steady, his eyes burning. This case isn't about a stolen car. It's about something much bigger. It's about what happens when the system decides that being in the wrong place, looking the wrong way, is enough to make you guilty. What do you think? Was the judge being fair here? Or had he already made up his mind before hearing the truth? The courtroom felt like it had stopped breathing. Judge Preston adjusted his glasses again, trying to mask the unease settling across his face. Prosecutor Mills shuffled his papers, pretending to look busy, but everyone could see the stiffness in his jaw. Malik, on the other hand, looked completely in control, calm, calculated, almost rehearsed. That was because he was rehearsed. He had spent countless nights in his room, whispering arguments to himself, pacing the floor until sunrise. While other kids his age were streaming movies or playing video games, Malik was memorizing case law and dissecting trial strategies. And now, inside this courtroom, every second of that preparation was about to pay off. Malik turned toward the jury again. His voice, though steady, carried an edge sharp enough to slice through the tension. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been told this case is simple, that the prosecution's story is airtight. But ask yourself, if it's so airtight, why are we already finding holes? Why is testimony conflicting? Why is evidence missing? He let the words hang in the air, then pivoted back toward the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to call my first witness. The room stirred. Reporters craned their necks forward. Judge Preston hesitated. And who would that be? Malik didn't flinch. Officer Bradley. The prosecutor shot up from his seat. Your Honor, this is highly irregular, but the judge cut him off. Mr. Mills, the defense has the right to call witnesses. Bailiff, bring in Officer Bradley. Moments later, the heavy double doors opened, and Officer Bradley stepped inside. Broad-shouldered, uniform crisp, he moved with the kind of authority only years on the force could give. But Malik noticed something else, the slight stiffness in his stride, the way his eyes darted to Mills as if silently asking for reassurance. Bradley took the stand. The oath was administered. He leaned back, arms crossed, waiting for the questions. Malik approached slowly. Officer Bradley, he began, in your report, you stated that you saw me behind the wheel of the stolen Lexus, correct? That's correct. And you pursued the vehicle? Yes. And arrested me? Yes. The jury scribbled notes. Everything seemed neat and tidy quickly until Malik leaned in closer. "Tell me, officer, what street were you on when you first saw the Lexus?" Bradley blinked. Jefferson Avenue." Malik tilted his head. "And what time was that?" The officer hesitated. "Around 2:15 in the morning." Malik nodded thoughtfully, then reached for a sheet of paper. "Interesting, because the GPS logs from your patrol car, which I subpoenaed this morning, place you over a mile away at that exact time." A ripple of gasps tore through the courtroom. The officer's face flushed. Mills jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. This data hasn't been verified," but the judge's gavel cracked. "Overruled. Sit down, Mr. Mills." Malik held the paper high so the jury could see. "Officer Bradley, can you explain how you saw me driving a Lexus on Jefferson Avenue when your own patrol car shows you sitting outside a convenience store across town?" The officer stammered. "Well, I must have gotten the time wrong." Malik's eyes narrowed. His voice dropped low, each word deliberate. "Or maybe, officer, you didn't see me at all. Maybe you just assumed. Maybe someone wanted to close this case quickly, and you were willing to write me into your story." The gallery erupted. Reporters scribbled frantically. Some jurors leaned forward, their doubts visibly growing. Bradley shifted in his seat, sweat glistening at his temple. "That's not true." Malik stepped back, calm as ever. "We'll let the jury decide." For the first time since the trial began, Prosecutor Mills looked shaken. His confidence was cracking, and Malik wasn't done. "Your Honor," Malik continued, "I'd like to address another piece of evidence, the supposed witness statement from a bystander." Judge Preston leaned forward. "Go on." "The prosecution has claimed that an eyewitness identified me near the stolen vehicle, but when I reviewed the report, I noticed something odd. The eyewitness description didn't match me at all. In fact, the report described the suspect as having blonde hair." A stunned hush fell over the courtroom. Malik glanced back at the gallery. "Do I look like I have blonde hair?" Laughter rippled through the room before the bailiff barked for silence. Mills shot up again. "Your Honor, these are misinterpretations." But Malik cut in smoothly. "No, Mr. Mills. These are facts. Facts you chose to bury beneath assumptions." The jury's eyes darted between the teenager and the prosecutor. The power dynamic in the courtroom was shifting fast, and just when it seemed like Malik had struck enough blows, he went for the knockout punch. "Your Honor," he said, his tone firm, "I'd like to introduce one final piece of evidence. Security footage from the gas station where the Lexus was stolen." Mills's face drained of color. Malik held up a USB drive. "This footage, which I obtained through a simple public records request, clearly shows the real suspect jumping into the Lexus. And that suspect is not me." The judge's eyes widened. "Play the footage." The gallery erupted as a screen was wheeled in. Grainy video flickered to life. The gas station appeared, lit by harsh fluorescent light. In the corner, a Lexus idled by the curb. Seconds later, a figure in a hoodie sprinted across the lot, yanked the door open, and sped off. The suspect's face was briefly visible under the lights. Pale skin, light-colored hair, nothing like Malik. The jury gasped. The gallery buzzed. Even Judge Preston leaned back in disbelief. Malik folded his arms, his voice calm but carrying like thunder. "That, ladies and gentlemen, is your car thief, not me." The prosecutor's composure shattered. He fumbled through his notes, his voice rising. "Your Honor, this footage is circumstantial. It doesn't prove where the defendant was at the time." But Malik raised a hand, stopping him cold. "It doesn't have to, because I also have 3 alibi witnesses who will testify that I was inside that same gas station at that exact moment buying snacks." Gasps echoed once again. Reporters scribbled like their pens were on fire. Malik's voice sharpened. "The real thief stole the car while I was standing 20 feet away inside the store, and instead of chasing him, officers arrested me because I happened to be nearby. That's not justice. That's laziness." The gallery was electric now. People were on the edge of their seats. Judge Preston rubbed his forehead, visibly shaken. What he had expected to be a routine conviction was spiraling into something much larger. Malik wasn't just defending himself. He was tearing the entire case apart, piece by piece. And here's the crazy part. Malik still wasn't done, because the next truth he uncovered would not only humiliate the prosecution, it would reveal something darker hiding beneath this entire case. The bailiff barked for order again as the judge raised his hand. "Court will recess for 10 minutes, Judge Preston said, his voice heavy. "We will resume shortly." The gavel struck, but the chaos didn't fade. Reporters swarmed the aisles, trying to catch Malik's mother, who sat quietly near the back, tears brimming in her eyes. The prosecutor stormed out of the room, whispering furiously to his assistants. And Malik, he simply sat back down, calm, collected, and unbothered, like he had known this exact moment was coming all along. When the recess ended, the energy in the room had shifted entirely. The jury looked different, less certain, more curious. The gallery leaned forward, eager for more. And Judge Preston? Well, even he no longer carried that smug, dismissive air from earlier. Malik rose once again. Your Honor, before we continue, I have one more request. I'd like to call for the release of all internal memos related to this investigation, because I believe this wasn't just about a stolen car. I believe there was an active effort to suppress exculpatory evidence. Evidence that could prove my innocence. The prosecutor jumped to his feet, face red. Objection! This is absurd, but Malik's eyes locked on him, unflinching. What's absurd, Mr. Mills, is pretending that withholding evidence is justice. The law has a word for that. Misconduct. The room went silent again. If you were in Malik's shoes, standing alone against a powerful prosecutor, what would you do? Fight back or stay silent and hope the truth came out on its own? The courtroom was silent again, but this time it wasn't routine silence. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Judge Preston leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Mr. Thompson, are you suggesting prosecutorial misconduct? Malik stood tall, his hands resting firmly on the table. I'm not suggesting. Your Honor, I'm proving it. Gasps rippled across the gallery. Malik lifted another folder from his briefcase. Inside were copies of internal emails he had obtained through a Freedom of Information request. His voice cut like a blade as he read aloud. Quote, "We don't have time to chase down this lead. The Thompson boy will do. He fits the description close enough." The courtroom erupted. Mills shot out of his chair. "That's taken out of context," he shouted, but his voice cracked under the weight of panic. Malik held the paper high for the jury to see. "This isn't context. This is corruption. This is someone deciding my guilt before the investigation was even complete." The jurors' faces shifted. Shock, anger, disgust. Malik wasn't done. "Officer Bradley," he said suddenly, "I have one final question for you." The officer, still sweating on the stand, shifted uncomfortably. "What is it? Do you recall texting the prosecutor the night before you filed your report?" The officer froze. His lips parted, but no words came out. Malik pulled out another sheet of paper. "Because I have a copy of that text right here. It says, and I quote, 'Don't worry. I'll make sure the report lines up. The kid won't stand a chance.'" The gallery exploded with outrage. Reporters nearly fell over each other to get it all down. Bradley's face turned pale. He looked toward Mills for help, but the prosecutor had gone rigid, staring at the floor. Malik's voice thundered through the room. "This wasn't a mistake. This was a setup." Judge Preston's gavel slammed down again and again, but the order never fully returned. Everyone in that courtroom knew they weren't just witnessing a trial. They were witnessing an unraveling. Malik stepped closer to the jury, lowering his voice so that every syllable landed heavy. "You've heard their lies. You've seen their cover-ups, and you've watched as the truth peeled it all away. They tried to steal my freedom because to them I was an easy target. But justice isn't about what's easy. Justice is about what's true." The room fell into a tense, almost sacred silence. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, the foreman's voice trembled as he read the words. "On the charge of grand theft auto, we find the defendant, Malik Thompson, not guilty." The gallery erupted. Cheers, applause, tears. Malik's mother sobbed into her hands, shaking with relief. Reporters bolted for the exits, already calling their editors, knowing the headlines would explode across the nation by morning. Malik closed his eyes, exhaling for the first time in weeks. His body shook, not from fear, but from release. But the story didn't end with a verdict. Within days, Officer Bradley was suspended. Prosecutor Mills faced an internal investigation, and the city itself was forced to reckon with a truth it had ignored for too long, that justice wasn't always blind. Sometimes it was biased. Malik became a symbol, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. His fight wasn't just about his freedom anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been silenced, ignored, or railroaded by a system designed to break them. Narrator, voiceover. They thought they could bury him, that a teenager with no lawyer, no money, and no power would never stand a chance. But what they forgot is that truth doesn't need permission to come out. Malik Thompson didn't just defend himself, he exposed them. And in doing so, he gave hope to everyone who's ever been told to sit down, stay quiet, and accept injustice. Because sometimes, the people you underestimate most are the ones who change everything. They framed him to protect themselves, but in the end, it was their lies that put them on trial. Do you think Malik should have gone on to become a lawyer after this? Or should he have walked away from the system that nearly destroyed him? Drop your thoughts below.